This is a little program that I wrote. Basically, it's a program designed to keep track of salespeople and their sales figures. That's the most basic function. And I'm thinking of adding some more, but I just wanted to sort of show this portion of it. So maybe before I go into the code, I'll just show what it does. So basically, we have the option of adding a salesperson. Then we can add the name. Let's call it video test and ID 23. So now if we want to add a sales figure for our salesperson that we just added, then we can put in the date. ID was 23 and let's say sold 67. So now basically what's happened is that when we added the salesperson from here, the salesperson got added to this text file. So you've got video test, and the way a text file is set up is so that it can be imported into Excel. Imported into Excel and be changed to columns in Excel. So if we look at the sales figures, then we'll see we've added this is the sales figure that we entered over here, and this last value that we didn't enter, that's automatically calculated based on a predetermined price multiplied by the quantity of units sold. So that's what's happening in the background when we use the program. View salespersons, I haven't added that functionality yet, but I've sort of added it to the menu already. So let's go to the code. So basically I've just got the main program, I've got a main menu class, I've got a sales class, and I have a salesperson class. So the main class just calls the main menu function. So the main menu function just sets out the main menu, and then from there you can decide. I use the switch method. Apparently the switch method is quite old, like it comes from C rather than C++. I think C++ preferred to use the if conditional statement, but I like switch, so it works in a case like this quite well. So in this case I used switch, so depending on which number we input, we either go to adding the salesperson, adding the sale, or viewing the sales people. So that's all that's in the main menu class and the main menu function. And that's an infinite loop, the main menu. So as soon as one of these functions are completed, automatically goes back to the main menu. Then we've got the sales class. Yeah, basically for sales we've got, in order to know what the sale is, we need to have the person's ID, we need how many the quantity of that was sold, and the date it was sold on. So the name of the person that sold the goods is related to the ID. That's why I haven't got the name of the salesperson in here. So for sales, all we've got is get value, which basically this is how the total value of sales is calculated. So as I said earlier, that last value, this value, which we don't input, is calculated over here. So when we call get value, it calculates how many items were sold, multiplied. In this case the price was 22, whatever currency you're in. And salesperson class, this is where most of the code is. A salesperson basically has a name and an ID. So this is where the ID, the salesperson ID, is linked to this ID. So when we know the ID here, we can link that ID in the sales class to the name in the salesperson class. And we've got a couple of functions here to add the salesperson, to view the salesperson, and to add the sale. So here we basically got our constructors and our destructor. This funny piece of code is just so that we can use um, the cout and cin on our class, because you can't, by default you can't use that on the class. Get lines, I sort of created this function just so I don't have to keep using the cin.ignore. So I just use get lines instead of continuously adding cin.ignore. Adding a salesperson, I add the system CLS that just clears the screen every time it comes to the function. Basically we get the name, we get the ID, open the file, and then if the file's not found, then got this error message. Otherwise we just output the ID and the name to the salesperson file. That's all that is. View the salesperson, I still need to do this, so I won't get into that. And then we add the cell, again CLS, all my variables, ask for the date, ask for the ID, ask for the quantity, and then we put that into a sales class. We create a sale, well, I created a variable of type sales, and then open the salesperson file just so that I can see what the count is there. I could have actually created a separate function called count, and we just called the count function. Could have actually called the count function over here, and then that would return the count value. But anyways, I didn't do that over here. This was interesting. I learned this while I was doing this. If you iterate over a file and you get to the end of the file, seekg won't work until you clear the file first. So I was having some trouble with that. I wasn't sure why the cursor wasn't going to the beginning of the file. So I found out you need to use clear before seekg would work. Then I basically getting the input from the salespeople, putting it into a vector, the ID and the name, and then in order to use the ID, when I'm pushing it back into a vector, I'm using a string vector because you can't use getLine on an int. So I'm using the string vector to put the ID in. So when I'm coming to sales figures so that I can output the sales data into the sales figures file, I need to change the int or the string vector. I need to change those values to ints. So first I output the date over there. That's over the sales figure, so that's outputting the date over here. And then this is what I'm using to turn the string vector value into an int. So I've got basically dummy variables or temp variables that I put the string vector value into this string. Then I turn that string into an int and put that int value into this int, which is over there. And then once I've got that value as an int, I can push that int back into this vector. I don't know how much sense that is making, but basically this piece of code here takes the string from the string vector and turns the value into an int that I can use. The reason I need to do that is because when I want to compare the ID that I provided or that the user provided with the int in my vector, I need to use an int vector. I can't use a string vector because you can't compare a string and an int. So that's why I change that into an int so I can compare I change it into an int so I can push it back into the int vector, because I can only use an int over here, int or int vector, to compare to the ID that was provided. So then once we find the ID, we output the matching name. So this is where the match between the ID and the name comes in. once you find the matching ID, it inputs the corresponding name into the file. So that's where this comes in, where the corresponding name is found and outputted into the file. And then we've got the quantity, we've got a pointer, and also here that get value function for sales comes in. So because I've created the sales variable, I can call sales variable of type sales. I can call the get value. Here's the get value function, and that will automatically calculate the total value of sales based on the values that were used when this variable was created. So that's why I put it into that variable, and that's basically how that works. So I look at the data from the salesperson file and match it to the ID that was given, and then you output the data that was put in into the sales figure function. So the way I think I mentioned, the way I formatted this with commas separating the values is just so it's easier to import into Excel. So perhaps just to demonstrate, if I were to import this into Excel, that's day month. So that would be imported into Excel, and then you could probably turn it into a table, and then use a pivot table. So once you've accumulated enough data, then I see ID is, I've selected ID instead of date. Anyways, so once you've collected enough data, you'll likely be able to play with the data and dig into the data and have a closer look of what's going on in the data. So that's basically the purpose of this program.